here and call this press conference because I have grave concern about the recent communications of racial epithets that have been set forth here in San Francisco by various officers, in our view, representing a culture of racial bias that exists within the department. We're outraged by the most recent statements that were generated or widely publicized in the media regarding a particular sergeant who made derogatory statements, N-word statements about what he would like to do once he moves to the Bayview station, which is the station where the officers from Mario Woods came from. And so from our point of view, enough has not been done to weed out this mindset and culture that exists within the department. So as a consequence of that, we believe and we are recommending that the chief must go.
That's right.
Must go because all of the negative statements, all of the racial epithets that have occurred, and all the various killings that have taken place have all occurred on his watch.
That's right.
And so it is hard, it defies logic and common sense for us to accept the notion that he is the one that should lead the charge in the reform efforts. Because even after Mario Woods, there have been at least 2 statements that we know of. Venture statements coming from officers, all of which should, if the chief was on his job and was making the kind of reforms that he claimed to have made, they would not have happened.
That's right.
But they have happened.
That's right.
And so from our point of view, he must go.
That's right.
Secondly, we are concerned, and very much so, that enough has not been done in the area of reform. We know recently that the district attorney put forth a select committee and they made various recommendations. Some of those recommendations should not be pie in the sky and done at some later point. They should have been done yesterday.
That's right.
The most significant one from my point of view is the whole issue of stop data, and that is the racial profiling. The racial profiling occurs in neighborhoods where black men and white, brown men and women, if you will, are being stopped without probable cause. They're having their cars searched. They're being handcuffed. If they don't like it, they wind up in jail, and they have their entire records, in fact, called into question. The department has never made any significant effort to gather reliable data. That is by choice, because they do not want us to know that there is, in fact, statistical data that would support the fact that racial bias policing does occur in the city and county of San Francisco. And if you don't get the data that's reliable, you can always have a point of deniability. And that, I think, is what's taking place. And so the question of accountability and transparency are significant issues that should be, in fact, be part of what takes place now. This cannot be done by the present chief. At the time of Mario Woods' demise, outrageous shooting, and killing, we wrote a letter to the department, my office did, to the Department of Justice, as well as what others have done, the ACLU, the mayor's office, making a request that there be an investigation regarding pattern and practice as to the level of policing, the constitutional policing that takes place in San Francisco. The Department of Justice essentially deferred and sent that off to cops, which is also part of the Department of Justice, and then they are making their own particular efforts. We do not and have not believed that was sufficient.
That's correct.
Enough,
that's correct.
Because there was no teeth in
That's
it.
right.
We recognize that Ron Davis and his men and women at cops want to do the right thing. They want to identify the various problems that exist in San Francisco, and they have done so by earmarking them. But the problem on it is there's no enforcement mechanism there.
Right.
So
Just take one step back.
there's no enforcement mechanism. So as a consequence of that, it is our belief that we should, in fact, ask and encourage the Attorney General, Kamala Harris, to come to San Francisco. And engage and conduct an investigation into the department to determine whether or not there does exist this pattern and practice of constitutional improper policing that we do believe exists in San Francisco. And so to that end, we have prepared a letter that we have sent, that is being sent to her today, that basically, requesting requesting that she, as the top law enforcement officer in the state, come to San Francisco and engage in a kind of investigation to root out, first to identify and then to root out the kind of cultural bias that exists within the city and county of San Francisco Policing Department. We recognize and we're very much offended by the level of force, excessive force, that is used against members of the African American and Hispanic communities. There's been a recent shooting of the homeless man several weeks ago. An outrageous shooting where this man was shot a number of times.
30 seconds.
He was number of times, but he was unarmed. And we also know what happened to Mario Woods in the shooting in the back of over 21 times. And we also know about Alex Nueto, who was shot at over 50 times.
Right.
And so there are a number of cases that are taking place, and every one of those cases, the police department has justified that shooting by playing certain things. Every shooting cannot be justified.
Right.
And so from my point of view, something must be done.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yes.
My name is Felicia Jones, and I'm with SEIU 1021 and Justice for Mario Woods Coalition. We stand together with our allies, not only from John Burris law firm, but also Jeff Adachi. DA Gascon wanted to be here with us, but he couldn't rearrange his schedule. We have the lead counsel for ACLU. We have Mother Gwen Woods, Mario Woods' mother, here with us, standing, letting the city and the world know that our battle cry is enough is enough, and that we are not moving. We are standing still. We are standing firm, fighting for justice among Black and Latino people here of San Francisco. And so here we are, and I would like to bring up Jeff Adachi.
Thank you. I'd like to thank John Burris for writing this letter. I wrote a letter 4 weeks ago, and the Attorney General did not listen to me, so maybe she'll listen to John Burris. I'm here today to reiterate that we absolutely need an independent investigation done, not only as to police practices and use of force in San Francisco, but as to the 4 shootings that we've been focusing on and others. I think that it's a very simple thing to do. This is something that's done in cities and counties all over the United States. If the city doesn't want to do it, if the Attorney General doesn't want to do it, then they should bring the resources in to bring in an independent agency to perform that function. Nothing is going to change in San Francisco. That's very clear. And the Luis Gongora shooting is the best evidence of that.
Right.
Had the city and the police chief put their foot down and said that what happened to Mario Woods, what happened to Kenneth Harding was wrong, and that should not happen.
Right.
And to illustrate how you can take somebody into custody without shooting them to death and assassinating them, we would not have yet another death on our city's hands.
Right.
And the reality is that it is going to happen again unless things change.
That's right.
Right now, there's a debate that's going on from the police commission about use of force, and it is a debate as to whether or not the terminology should stay as reasonable force or minimal force. Police departments all over the country are now responding to reform, yet San Francisco is still in the 19th century.
Right. That's right, Jeff.
So there's a few things that I want to mention today. One is that we are focusing on use of force at our annual Justice Summit coming up on May 25th.
Thank you.
We have engaged one of the nation's top experts, Ken Williams, on use of force. He's a former homicide detective from Boston, and he is coming here to review these cases and to talk publicly about what happened in the 4 shootings. And that's going to be on May 25th at the public library. The other thing that I've called for is that we have to have an independent auditor on the issue of race and gender discrimination in police practices and bias. We cannot trust the police department to do its own review.
That's right.
We hear that there are sergeants and people who are in top positions who are talking about going to Bayview Station so they can kill ends.
Niggas.
That's what he said.
They said.
It's it's not a situation where we can trust the police department to do this. And one of the big problems is that we're getting resistance when we're trying to examine police biasing. I have a case on tomorrow that I'm handling right here in the hall, where it shows that 70% of the people who were stopped and arrested for smoking in public were African American in 2015. And I'm doing a motion in order just to get copies of the police reports in those instances, and that's being opposed by the district attorney and by the police department. And so unless we get accountability and from an independent source, people are not going to be asking these questions. And so we really need an independent auditor. I didn't see anything like that in the millions of dollars that the mayor has doled out to the police department, and that's one thing that we need to push for. So again, thank you.
Yeah, I have one more question. I have a couple points that I want to make that I think are extraordinarily important, and that is that the department has to deal with the question in a modern way in 21st century policing on people with edge weapons. The fact that a person has a knife is not a death warrant, and one should not use deadly force just because they exist with a knife. There are questions, and these issues are being looked at and evaluated around the country. And part of that whole issue is, are officers being trained on how to de-escalate a situation as opposed to being aggressive and confronting it. Not only is that an important area, the other area is how do you deal with mentally impaired people.
Right.
And we have found many cases where mentally impaired people are being shot and killed because they've been confronted by the police who demand that they respond in a way that they were sane. The point of fact is they're not sane. And you can't give them sane commands and expect them to respond in such a way.
Right.
So training on how to deal with mentally impaired people, emotionally impaired people is a must.